Again. All right, today I want to talk about formatting strings and options for that in Emacs Lisp. And this is motivated by work I've done in Python where you want to build up a string. So for example, I have this data over here, and this is motivated by TemplateL that I'll talk about at the end. But we have data here that we want to use to construct a string like this. All right, so here you can see there's something inserted for the title, and then we've made an HTML list using this data. And in Python, we might use f-strings, or you might be familiar with Jinja or Mako or another templating language for it. Today, we'll take a look at how to do this kind of thing in Emacs Lisp. All right, so the most standard way I almost always do something like this is with format. And format, let's take a look at it. Format, it lets you put in a string and have some objects, and then you have some escape characters over here like %s or %d that will put in a number or a string or something like that. All right, so I do that kind of thing quite a lot, and I think for this case it would look something like this. So let's make a Emacs Lisp block here, and I'll go ahead and copy this data. We're going to use it verbatim. Let's just do setq data like this, and then we'll be able to reuse this as we go. So let's do that. All right, so that saves it there, and then a format spec that would do this is probably like format, and grab this. All right, so we're going to replace this one with %s. So we'll insert something there, and then we're going to have to replace all of this with %s here. And then we need to say what we're going to do for replacements. So let me just put this down here for a second. Let's take a look at how to get the data out of there. So if I say assoc title, am I doing that in the right order? This will give me the con cell, and if I put a footer on this, it will give me the title. All right, so that's the first string that we'll want to put in there. So I'm just going to drop it in here, and that's going to get put into this first one. And then to create the second string, we actually need to loop over the users. So let's go ahead and look at that first. Footer assoc users data is going to give me the list of users, and then we should loop over each one of these to construct what we have down here. So that's going to look like CL loop for user in this collect, and I'm going to use format inside here. So let's put in a string li, and it looks like href equals %s. And then we're going to put in another thing here, %s /a /li, and that's going to be in quotes. And now we just have to say what goes in this first string and what goes in this second string. So the first string will be the URL, and the second string is going to be the name. So that's going to be footer assoc URL user and footer assoc URL, name user. All right, so that should give us then those two items. So li looks pretty good, and all we need to do is join these. So let's do string dash join, and we'll do that, and that looks like it will give us those two things. And all we need to do now is maybe put these down here as the second item. And let's see, that looks more or less like what we have, other than we might want to have some spaces in here just for readability. All right, so let's see, why is this one like that? It looks like because there's a space there, so let's get rid of that. All right, so that looks pretty close for that, and the only thing we might try to do here is make sure this is all aligned. And that is basically the same thing that we see up at the top. All right, so H1 UL looks good. All right, so that's one way we could construct it from that data. And here we're just looking up CLUD title data. Then we have to construct this loop so that if we add different number of users, it'll automatically change, and we're just looking up the URL and the name down here. All right, so that's not too bad. It's a little bit irritating if you you have to remember these kind of %s escape characters in order, and so that's a little bit tedious if there are too many of them, especially when we start nesting here. We have the first one here corresponding to the title, the second one here corresponding to this, but it's overall it's not super bad. And maybe if you use like fancier things in looking up the A list, you could avoid this CLUD thing. But that's a pattern I'm super familiar with and often do. All right, so now let's move on and check out format spec. This is also a built-in, but I never think of it because it's quite far from what I just normally think of doing. I see it a lot in especially older code, but let's take a look. So we have format spec. Now instead of just %s, we have these %u and %l, and then we have lookup things down here. And so now it doesn't matter what order we put these in, and you don't have to remember the order. We just have to define these %u, %l things. So let's modify what we made up there and say format spec, and put, I'm just going to copy this again. So here we're going to say %t for title, and how about %u for user. And then we have to define our list. And so if you notice over here, it uses this back quote, and that's mostly so that we can insert the comma values over here. So I'll follow that as well. So let's make a back quote, and then instead of %, we use $t, which is kind of like a character, and we'll put the con cell here, and then we're going to again use this data like so. All right, so that will be the substitution for %t, and then we're going to need the one for %u, and we'll just use the same thing that we used here, like that. And we could say format spec here. Let's just replace them all. So this one, we're already using %u, although I guess we can reuse the %u there. And then this one will be %n. And here we need to put a comma. No, backtick here. So now we're going to use %u here as the cdr there, and $n dot, and we'll get the name. All right, that's going to be that format spec. That's going to close that, and indent all of these things the right way. And now this should run, and it gives us really the same thing, but with these different kinds of ways of using the spec. So this is a little bit nicer. We can use these kind of %u, %t, %u, %n that have these definitions kind of by name. So that's a pretty reasonable looking compromise, I guess. As being more specific, but again, format spec, I don't know why. It never comes to my mind. All right, in Python, I'm familiar with the f-string, so let's take a look at f-string. This is one that I wrote. It lives in scimax, and it's like S format that I'll talk about in the next one, but it allows us to write things like f-string with this $a syntax that allows us to put the following things in. All right, so here we'll write f-string, and we come back up here. We'll just copy this example. And we're going to take this out and put $title. And since I'm kind of live coding this, we'll find out if this actually works. And this is what the f-string would look like. And now we just need to define variables for title and users. So let me wrap this in a let statement. The title is still going to be the same thing. We're not fundamentally changing how we use the data in this case. We are only changing how we structure the code that generates the strings. Okay, so now I'm just using let, which is temporarily defining these variables, and I don't use f-string super often, so here's kind of hoping that it works. And it seems to, it basically works. I just need to get rid of these two spaces, and that is another way where we define some variables now that we're going to use, and we refer to them by name. Now f-string, if you are watching, the help is kind of similar to what S format is. So S format, and it even shares this syntax. So let's take a look at S format. S format comes from the S package, which is some extra things that are defined for strings. And it allows you to make a template that looks like this and use a variety of ways that you might look up what the answers are. So what I would look at here is S format, and I think we can just use the same syntax as here. So this is going to, this is our template. We just need to insert a title and the users. And then let's use a get as the way to look it up, and then use an a list. And the a list is similar to what we did before. We need to say define a string for title, and that one is going to look like this. And then we need to define the users. Again, we're using this backtick so that we can use the comma operator in here. And this should work and give us the right string. All right, so let's see, maybe we should modify this so that we use S format just for fun. S format. All right, and then here we're going to use a get also. You can also use a hash table or other fancy things, but I usually just use these. They're super easy to remember. Let's see, and then we need to change this to URL. So the big benefit of all of these is just that you can use these named variables. And so it's quite easy to read at the end. Let's see if we did it right. Looks like it. And then you know that title goes to title, users goes to users, and the only downside of this to f-string, and probably the reason I wrote f-string, is just the verbosity of having to create these a-lists over here by that. All right, but otherwise seems pretty reasonable. The next one I'll talk about is Mustache. So Mustache is a template library that it's been around a pretty long time, maybe close to a decade. I see in the GitHub repo there's definitely changes from like 9 years ago. And this one is moving towards a library or like a Jinja style way of templating. So what we do in Mustache and what we'll see next in TemplateL is you create your template and then you provide a context to look at it in. So what we'll have here is mustache-render, and we need our template. Let's see, let's try this one. So what we're going to have here is, instead of this $, we'll have double curly brackets. And down here, instead of this, we'll have double curly brackets. So now anything in the double curly brackets is going to get rendered, and we have to provide a context. And the context we'll use is, in this case, we'll use a hash table. And HT is a shorthand for a hash table that I've used. And let's see, what do we need to put in there? We need to have one for title. And let's just put test in for now. And let's see what happens if I put in users test2. Let's see, does that make a hash table? It looks like it. And if I run this one, then this will substitute in test and test2. So that's looking good. All we need to do is put the right things in there for this. All right, so let's put in this for the users and see what does that come out. That comes out sort of right. And I'll get to what's happening here in just a second. All right, so this is almost right, other than what we're seeing is these HTML things are getting escaped. And that is probably some option that I need to say that we don't want it to escape. So let's see, there is something where we have to say that it is safe, which we're going to do maybe by putting this in front of it. All right, so this is the syntax for something that is considered safe, and safe means that it does not escape these HTML things in there. All right, so that's also, pretty reasonable. We have named things that we can put in here, and we have a hash table here that that's being looked up. All right, so last thing that I want to look at, the whole reason I was inspired to work on this in the first place and make these notes, is this new package TemplateL that came across my feed today. And I'm always looking for ways to construct things in Emacs to make web pages, to make reports. If you follow my work with OrGraph or things like that, you know, sometimes we make large outputs that need to have structured data in them. And this one is motivated very strongly by Jinja and supports a lot of really interesting things. So let's take a look at just this basic example. The main function we will use here is TemplateL render string. This is our template. It looks a little bit like we saw before. We have the double brackets and title and double brackets. We'll see in a second. I'm not sure if these spaces are mandatory or if they're just there for readability. So this one should look very familiar. You could just see that we're going to substitute in title for this. Now this is totally different than what I've seen in the previous methods. In all the previous methods, we have to calculate what the whole string here is, and we do the looping inside emacs Lisp. If you look here though, we have this syntax here that says for user in users. So that's my loop that I was doing in CL loop. And here's the body. It's calculating this for every user. And it's using this cool dot notation, user.url and user.name, which is getting directly from exactly the same cons list that we were looking at before. And then here's the end. And it's just remarkable how good this works and how easy it is to see. You can see here that we have the same template. And maybe it's kind of interesting. There's these extra spaces in here. I don't really see where that's coming from off the top of my head. Let's see what happens if we move that to there. That gets rid of one of them. And I see that's going to get rid of the nope. Yeah, interesting. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, so that's where those are coming from. All right, so that's basically it. That's how we can do string templating, and with that, I will call it a day.